Hello, welcome to Stretty News TV. I'm joined by a prominent journalist, Miguel Delaney. How are you, Miguel?
Not too bad, thanks.
I believe
You're here to be called prominent.
I believe you're in Ireland right now.
I am just back for the game Wednesday, so flew back today. Didn't get to go to Keane's press conference today, as that was on while I was flying. But I'll be there tomorrow for O'Neill. And
Right.
Vidic, of course, is down.
So your journalistic career obviously started in Ireland. What papers did you start with?
Well, I did the journalism degree in DIT, and at the end of that, I was kind of lucky enough, basically, to get a job. Well, to get part-time work in the Sunday Tribune while I was doing a master's in politics, and kind of just from there, I suppose, from being there 2 days a week, sub-editing, kind of just got to do writing more and more. Like that was around 2004, 2005. Then by about 2006, they kind of let me properly cover football. So like from about 07 or 08 then, I was starting to be sent over to England. And because of obviously the connection with Ireland, I was sent over to, the Irish connection with United. I was sent to cover United a fair bit, which is quite odd doing it for a Sunday paper, because so often I'd be sent over for a Friday press conference and then have to come back the next day and actually go to the game. That happened a fair amount of times. But I mean, just through that, like I suppose you just get to know people around. It just develops from there.
Did you grow up following an interest in Premier League and European football? Because you do a fair bit of writing for Blizzard, and it's not just Premier League stuff.
To be honest, pretty much anything. I mean, as you can tell from the name, obviously, my mother's Spanish, so I've always kind of had an interest in that side. Like Osasuna are my local club in Spain. But I've always just had as broad interest in football, Irish football as well, everything. I mean, I've obviously when I was working in Ireland, I had to cover a lot of League of Ireland as well. But once Sunday Tribune went bust in 2011, it was probably the first victim of the first media victim of the crash in Ireland. I was inevitably moving over to London.
Mm. So obviously writing with Irish papers, United stories, you cover a lot of United right now, and your stories seem to be very informative. With stories like say transfer and what's happening within the club. What stories did you break when you were writing in Ireland? Did you break any big
the first big one I got was, it was one of those things like having been sent over. Like the last time I was sent over in the 08-09 season was for the Manchester derby, which was Ronaldo's last derby. And then that's sort of like just, having been around, I was there a lot around that time, and developed one particular contact who kind of introduced me to others. And the first one I got was basically that they were going to sign Owen, which to be honest I was absolutely incredulous with. But because I'd had it from three different people and one main one, I kind of obviously ran with it and went from there.
So then obviously the Irish papers obviously picked up on it, and obviously nowadays when you print something, I think with social media, and you've gained quite a big following on that, does pressure come along with that? Because whenever you print something nowadays, people always hang on to your words, and they use social media. As other journalists too, people are quite quick to jump on if something doesn't pull off and the pressure really comes on.
Funny enough, I was actually thinking about this because in relation to, I suppose, when we're sent to cover a press conference, you're basically listening for every single word, and there's a certain sentence someone says, and you're kind of you're looking for headlines, and they're not headlines, but you're looking for that's actually a line. That's news that he said that. And from our own perspective, as you say, we write things, they're out there, and it's amazing. People put it back to you so much. Now, the one you don't want people to put it back to you because it's on record. That's our job. Some people misquote you. That is the annoying part. I mean, the many times I was accused of kind of writing a story that I didn't actually write it like that, and that's not what I'm saying. And there is a very important difference.
There's also agendas, and I'm sure you get bashed for that one.
All that.
There in January, obviously Manchester United signed Juan Mata. It was January the 2nd you popped up with the story, which you're, if not the first, you're definitely one of the first.
Well, we were the first in August, to be fair. I remember getting a bit of abuse for writing it in August, but I mean the interest was always there. Obviously from very early on, Mata and his family, I think because his father represents him, they kind of realised this was going to be a difficult time under Mourinho. But I think there had been a bit of an entente to Chelsea for a while to see how it goes. But obviously it didn't pan out as the Matas hoped. But United's interest always remained, but they obviously amped it up. Like I was told very early on, yeah, after I think it was Chelsea were playing at Southampton, and Mata was taken off, and I basically got the message next day they're gonna go over him.
And obviously it was one of the transfers that did pull off at the end. And I think even
reassuring.
even when you did report in August and even reporting the 2nd of January, the vast majority must have doubted it because it was
the misconception people have of a transfer as well. I mean, you get it so much of, oh, you said they'd sign him and they didn't. Well, you're not saying that. You're saying, like, our job is to report the situation as it stands. Now, as it stands, United are interested in a player. They're trying to make a move for a player, or any club, for example. You're not saying it'll definitely come off because you don't know if it'll definitely come off. Anything can happen between you reporting it and even the next. Like, I've had stuff that I remember, even like the Fernando stuff at the end of January. On I think it was the Wednesday night. I very, very definitely heard United are interested. There's been meetings. The next day, within 12 hours' time, City had basically kind of just blown them. Well, not blown them away, but the situation moved to the point where United were out of the running, and it was kind of City's to take him.
I think the perception people get, though, when you view some journalists, they expect you to be negotiating the deals. If you say this, you should be the one signing the paper.
Right, like this. I mean, there's some notorious Twitter accounts, of course, and given how many deals they have a knowledge of, it seems like you'd think they'd be they're actually at the negotiating table, but no, that's not the case.
Have you been to any David Moyes press conferences this season?
I haven't been any on a Friday because I obviously I'm based in London. Like, in that sense, I'm quite different. Say, I know you had Mark Ogden and Ian Ladyman on last week because they're actually properly on the Manchester beat, whereas I'm not. I'm on the London beat, but because of my previous work, I'd still have contacts from United who would still kind of pass on. Like, that's the nature of journalism. You'd still stay in touch if you have a good contact. Ultimately, you work it as much as possible. But it's just about maintaining connections, and because of that, so in that sense, I would get my information in a different way. Well, no, obviously the principle is the same, but I wouldn't specifically be covering United in the way that, say, the lads are. I just be the odd time passed on information that would be reportable.
But obviously,
I wouldn't have to say for example, if a story's about like the lads, as I'm sure they were saying last week, they'd always have to they have to be on top of every situation at the club, whereas that's not the case for me. It is the case for me a little bit with, say, someone like Chelsea.
Yeah, but see, back on Moyes, and I think this season with journalists especially, the difference between Ferguson and Moyes off the pitch, on the pitch is obviously a massive contrast. But even off the pitch, with the banning of journalists, we've seen the likes of Daniel Taylor under Ferguson for writing a book calling Fergie a genius, but still getting banned for it.
That's banned for a very different reason, I'd say. That's just pure Fergie's, Alex Ferguson's, I shouldn't know. With colloquialisms.
He got such a ban, and other journalists got a ban for, say, a season or maybe in a lifetime ban in some cases. But obviously, a journalist, they're releasing David McDonald, got a ban, and it was a ban just for 1 week. Moyes obviously spoke to him on the phone and kind of just gave him a lesson. If he's going to breach it again, then more serious circumstance, there will be much more serious circumstance. But he obviously gave him a chance, and there's quite of a difference with the way the club are approaching the media, especially with Woodward being so open in comparison to Gill in terms of fan groups and fans in general.
To be honest, I'm surprised they're not more open. Because I remember speaking to it. So, like, even in Ferguson's time, when I had to apply to go to a press conference, he just generally had no, like, the amount of international journalists I know who were trying to get into Alex Ferguson's press conferences and they weren't allowed, purely out of control. Like, if I had to get spanked, you'd have to you get onto the press office and say, well, we have to run it by the manager. And like, to be honest, for as big a club as United are, they run their media department almost like as if they're kind of they did run their media department under Ferguson as if they're kind of a parochial club. And of course, that was just an attempt, or a successful attempt, you might say, of Ferguson to maintain control of all those situations. They have opened up, obviously, but I'm still surprised that they haven't opened up more, to be honest.
I think, especially with the fan groups, they've had meetings with the likes of Must, and with the safe standing, and Woodward's been quite outspoken about it, and the quote he gave about bringing back the football club into the crest. They are looking to do things to kind of bring the fans back into the fold more so than the past since the takeover. It's been well documented before the takeover that David Gill was quite on good terms with fan groups, and after it just went. And obviously then we're talking about journalists getting banned and the control Ferguson had, and if you wanted a press conference or attend, they'd have to run it by the manager. Massive control differences. But obviously there's been a lot said this season about off the pitch with David Moyes and the way the quote he's been given, and he's been trying a lot. He's been making life hard for Newcastle and going to Cardiff and being happy with a draw. Do you know what? Is there a need for media training, do you think?
I'm not even sure. I mean, David Moyes has been a very good manager for over a decade at one of the biggest clubs in England. So I don't think it's really a case of media training. It's the one thing I would say in all of this. You can say pretty much anything you want if you're winning games. That's ultimately everything else is irrelevant. If you're winning games, you're bulletproof. You look at Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers still comes out with the sort of comments that last season would have got him ridiculed, but because he's winning, it's a lot harder to laugh at someone. And I suppose the problem with Moyes, it's not so much media training. It's that it's almost this kind of self-perpetuating thing. Whereas, you'll say something, then they get a bad result because of other issues. Then he has to kind of. The one thing you have to remember with Moyes, he's in quite a difficult situation in the sense that, unlike pretty much any manager in such a situation, he can't criticise his predecessor or his predecessor's work. I mean, that's a very easy out that a lot of managers use. Some of them do it all the time. He can't. And it's almost like he's a little bit restricted in many ways. But ultimately, he does look a little bit bemused at the moment, as if he's only fully grasping just how massive this job is.
I think the one thing for me, it's on this topic of media training. The main problem I think fans have with it all is he comes out with the statements that we're going to try, and you go back to the players, and the players they have responsibility too, and sometimes they do look like they're lacking confidence. But with comments like that, we're going to try and make things difficult for Newcastle. You're not exactly going to give them confidence. If you came out and you said, we're going to win next week, we're going to bounce back, we're going to make a difference.
The one thing with that's quite a minor thing. Like, I mean, unless the statements are really, unless it's the sort of headline like Mourinho saying Wenger is a specialist in failure, those sort of things don't really impact too much in the player. I mean, the players, they see their manager on the training pitch. That's where they get that's where the mood is generated for them. So in that, the media is not so important for player. Now, the one thing you might say is it could be more important in terms of the opposition. And the one thing I have to say, I wasn't at Old Trafford between August and December this season, but I went back for the first time this year to cover the Swansea FA Cup game. And walking up to the place, you could sense there's, it just wasn't the same. Again, this could be an intangible. It could be the sort of thing because I'm thinking it anyway, and it's something you presume. But there just felt as if just this lack of intimidation about it or something like that. And again, that feeds into opposition players.
Absolutely. I think there are a number of issues, including managerial issues, and I don't think he's just to blame, but I think that the club could have made it a lot easier for themselves in appointing someone that was more suited to the role.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it's been well documented too that there is a few issues in the dressing room. I'm not going to name names; they've been documented already. Do you think that it's the players' attitude, or is it the sake that the manager's just not up to the job?
The one thing I always say and always think in this, the absolute first job of any manager is to get a response from the players. And if you can't do that, then you're in trouble. And that's regardless of the context. I mean, it's not like this United squad, for all people go on about it, and all people go on about recent stories, it's not like this is Chelsea 2009, 2010, or sorry, Chelsea won in 2011 under AVB more so. It's not like it's that group of players. It's it's a team of pretty hardened champions, and in fact, I actually think this is probably quite a popular view or unpopular view. But given results, I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been more stories at the centre from the United players. And second, I think that's actually could be testament to the control that Alex Ferguson had over them. Because they're used to this, to completely, to not questioning the authority at all. And now there's that bit of a joke. Now, the one thing, as you alluded to yourself, Moyes is in a situation where a lot of the problems aren't of his own making, but the key issue is that his appointment has exacerbated a lot of issues.
Yeah. I think you can see that in performances, especially in some particular positions. Fergie was able to cover holes in the team, whereas Moyes...
Yeah, because of that, because of the massive... Like, I mean, if you look at it in a historical perspective, for a manager that's been in charge for 26 years, generated that winning record, for that to suddenly go, it's going to have a massive effect. It's going to be huge fallout, huge psychological effect. But that's exactly why you need someone as close in quality and personality as possible. And I mean, it comes back to, I know it's an unpopular view among some United fans, but it's why Mourinho was probably the main candidate in that sense, because he would have immediately come in and it wouldn't have been about replacing Alex Ferguson anymore. It would have been about Jose Mourinho being in the job. The same applies to Pep Guardiola, and maybe not so much in the summer of 2013, but you can see it. But I think it is starting to apply more with Jurgen Klopp. Moyes, it's a little bit too lukewarm in comparison to that.
I think you just have to look at the CV and you can see that. Some people do criticise the football Mourinho played, and it's something that a lot of fans are holding against him with the football he played at Porto. Given the squad he had, he wasn't going to be playing amazing football. Have you seen a difference in when he was first at Chelsea to where he is now, performance-wise and style of play?
Well, I think there's a bit of a misconception with Mourinho in general, because I don't think he has a set style. I think it's actually wrong to call him a defensive manager. I think what he is a pragmatic manager. He'll basically play whatever suits victory. And so, I mean, if you remember, his Chelsea team in between 04 and 07 were quite a mechanical team, not always that brilliant, but that was often because A, they were in complete control of matches, and they would just kind of get a go 1-0, 2-0, then just kind of shut them out, professional job. But B, if you remember actually, so in general, you can't deny that team was quite dull to watch, but it's almost to a degree because of the competitiveness of the games. But if you remember when they played Barcelona in the second leg in the Champions League in 04-05, that was one of the best counter-attacking performances I've seen from an English side in the last decade. It was exhilarating to watch. And I mean, some of the footballers Real Madrid team played as well. Obviously, of course, it helps if you have Ronaldo there, but there's been elements of that this season with Hazard. So I wouldn't say Mourinho is fundamentally a defensive coach. I'd say he's just purely pragmatic. If a specific game calls for a more exciting game, he will do it.
Oh yeah, I think that there is quite a lot of talk as well about someone replacing Moyes in the summer. This weekend we've seen the first two names with the two Dutch managers. Do you think he'd get past the summer?
Well, from what I know right now, it's not as unthinkable as it was even 2 months ago that he might lose his job. He does still retain the backing of key members of the hierarchy, most specifically Ferguson. And if you think about it, it's actually going to be very. I think for United to eventually dismiss him, it's basically going to take either someone going over Ferguson or Ferguson admitting he was wrong. He clearly has an affinity with Moyes. After all, that time he spent so many years talking about, how clubs have to give managers time. He brought it up at so many LMA meetings. But so I think it's quite. I think you couldn't say anything for certain at the moment, but I think the next month could be decisive.
Yeah, just to clear up on a bit before we end. Do Manchester United sack managers?
Sorry, say that again?
Do Manchester United sack managers?
Of course they do.
There is a myth, there is a perception that they don't do that, but then that perception comes from over 20 years and not having to sack a manager.
But that's and the problem as well is it's a problem with any philosophy. If you get stuck to any philosophy just for the sake of having a philosophy, that's fundamentally wrong because you're damaging yourself. You have to judge each situation on its merits essentially. And it's like if you go back to Sexton and Atkinson, both arguably should have been sacked much earlier, and it might have taken the club 26 years to win a title then. So that's what it comes down to. As to what the one thing to add is that as to whether they should sack Moyes right now, I mean, you can't escape the possibility that in 4 years' time we could all be sat here and what a master stroke by United to keep Moyes really proved us and so many people wrong.
Yeah.
At the moment, though, I wouldn't be putting money on that. I don't think there's enough evidence. It's almost like too many individual elements have gone wrong for him to bring it right back. And the one worry I would say in terms of long term is every time he gets a good result and you think, right, now they can build. So like say the Mata signing, sign Mata, big card, thinking, right, now this can be a proper start again. Champions League coming up, but then they immediately go and have one of their worst performances of the season.
Yeah.
So they can't seem to escape this cycle at the moment.
Every step forward seems to take 3 steps back.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's almost kind of one back, one forward, one back. It's kind of this constant triptych of defeat, or sorry, bad, good result, bad result. You know, as I say, the one thing you would hope, I think, for his point of view, is that I think it's the most fundamental issue, is that he starts to look at football as a little bit more nuanced, because at the moment it's just too rigid. And I think that's his absolute first step. But we'll see if he does it.
Right, so thanks for everything, Miguel. It was great having you on. Prediction for where you're going to finish the season?
I said third before the season started, and to be honest, I said that a little conservatively. I wanted to put them lower. It's easy to say now, but I thought I'd get far too much abuse. And also, I was thinking, Moyes might be better than anticipated. Right now, I'd say, can I say between 5th and 7th?
Sitting on the fence.
I wouldn't say fully sitting on the fence. They're not going to get Champions League, I'll put it that way.
Well, you never know.
No,
thanks for everything, Miguel. And if you want to read some of Miguel's work, ESPN, follow him on Twitter, Miguel Delaney, and leave your comments in the section below. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.